Lorraine Lee is now working at Prezi as their editorial director, but in a previous life, she worked in editorial for LinkedIn. And the interesting thing you should know about Lorraine, if you think about people who tell you, like, what does it mean to be like LinkedIn famous? So, first of all, this woman has 300,000 followers on LinkedIn. And while she is not going to come in here and give you a presentation that guarantees that you too, will have 300,000 followers, she's still going to be pretty damn good. So if you're going to listen to anybody tell you like how to be awesome on LinkedIn, this is your lady. And also how to give better presentations. We talked about that a little bit this morning. I mean, just in terms of like the way that Prezi and like, frankly, you, Lorraine, even before you got to Prezi, like really stepped up the game for how we think about video and content. And now that you are here, I'm sorry, I was just your hype woman. I was just
I heard from
hype
backstage.
you up.
I'm gonna be waiting this time to get this intro every time.
It's like, this is Lorraine. She's LinkedIn famous, and she's going to help you do it too. So I know you have a really jam-packed presentation, so I'm not going to like waste much more time with that. I'm going to hand this over to you. I'm going to drop off video, and I'm going to let you take it away from here.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you, Mary Ellen. And hello, everyone. Welcome, and thank you for joining me today. I am so excited to be here with Managing Editor Live to talk to you all about how you can beat video fatigue and stand out on video in your meetings, webinars, and on LinkedIn so that you impress your colleagues, customers, and whoever else is viewing your content. My name is Lorraine Lee, and I'm the editorial director at Prezi, which basically means that each week my team curates and helps to create dozens of Prezi videos, so we've developed a pretty good sense for what works well and what doesn't work so well when it comes to video and virtual presentations. Before we dive in, if you haven't already, please make sure to full screen my video for the best viewing experience. Now, I want to take us back to 5 years ago. I had flown from San Francisco to New York, and I was getting ready to enter the Empire State Building. I was so nervous. My palms were extremely sweaty. My body was cold, yet somehow hot at the same time. I was a nervous wreck. But I somehow gathered my courage together and I stepped onto the elevator to head to the video studio on the 25th floor. I was getting ready for my first ever on-camera interview as an editor at LinkedIn. Now, being on video, doing video interviews, those were not part of my job description, but I knew even back then that video was becoming really important to the business world, and I wanted to make sure that I was prepared. So here I was in New York, completely out of my element. I had scheduled 4 interviews across 4 days with CEOs, founders, and directors. And before those interviews, I spent hours researching them and researching their companies so that I could feel more prepared and a little less nervous. My first interview here was with the CEO of the Clinton Health Matters Initiative, and when it was done, I cannot tell you how relieved I was. I pushed forward and I finished the other 3 interviews, still completely freaking out inside, but I made it. During those years, I ended up gaining enough confidence to start my own video series and had the chance to interview powerhouse women across industries. And for my very last LinkedIn interview here, I was finally feeling more comfortable and I decided to step it up a notch and try my first live interview. And even though I was still nervous, you can see that I'm smiling and even kind of enjoying myself at this point. That live interview then gave me the confidence to step onto a tennis court in Berkeley, California, just a few weeks later for my first paid speaking gig as the on-court announcer for a professional men's tennis tournament. And this opportunity came about because an organizer there had seen my videos on LinkedIn and reached out. Fast forward, and now I get to be here with all of you today as a virtual keynote speaker. And I shared that story with you because I want you to see that it is very, very possible for all of us to learn how to get more comfortable and stand out on video so that we create great videos that can not only impress our audiences, but also lead to new opportunities. So in the next 30 minutes or so, I'm going to share what I've learned doing video interviews, and I'm sure is the case with all of you, countless video meetings to help you stand out on video and beat video fatigue. Then after that, I'll share how you can use video to build visibility on LinkedIn. We'll cover how you can be more confident on video and keep your audience engaged. I'll then share some best practices for video calls and meetings. And then lastly, we'll talk about how you can ensure that the videos that you're sharing on LinkedIn have the most impact and reach possible. As I mentioned before, my name is Lorraine Lee, and I'm the editorial director at Prezi, a virtual presentation software for the hybrid office. Before Prezi, I was an editor at LinkedIn for 6 years, where I created and hosted its Female Founders video series, and I was part of the team that launched LinkedIn's first video product all the way back in 2016, so I've been around video for a lot of my career. Please feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. I frequently make posts about virtual presenting and video communications, and LinkedIn, of course, and I would love to stay in touch with you after this is over. So now that we've all been introduced, let's dive in. I want to start off by normalizing again that being nervous or uncomfortable on video is completely natural, especially in our virtual setup with all of these additional factors that we have to deal with. I mentioned that I've done quite a few video interviews before, and I still get nervous when I'm on camera. At Prezi, I work with a lot of keynote speakers, and I know that they sometimes get nervous. And for many of them, this is a big part of their job, if not their full-time job. So if you're feeling this way, it's totally normal. And we'll talk about techniques to quiet those nerves and also ways to boost your confidence so that instead of feeling like this, you feel more like this. Ready and excited to create amazing virtual presentations and videos that will have you feeling so proud of yourself and so energized after seeing your audience's reaction. By the end of this presentation, you'll be well on your way to getting these types of reactions from whoever is on the other side of your video. But first, before we can learn how to stand out on video, we need to acknowledge the reality of our day-to-day. We have all of these priorities and distractions in today's world that are making it really hard to grab and keep people's attention. Now, this isn't much of a surprise when we see things like this on a daily basis, aka the before. Your audience's world is noisy. They are getting constantly bombarded with messages and content. Screen sharing is just not cutting it anymore as a way to be remembered or to stand out. And we can't blame video fatigue because there are so many videos and other types of video content holding our attention. If you take a moment to reflect on how much video content you're watching on a daily basis, I know personally my number is really high up there, you'll realize that video fatigue isn't actually an issue. We're just bored with the screen shares and tired of seeing the same types of presentations over and over and over again. We can't settle for the status quo anymore when it's possible for our screen shares to look more like this, aka the after. So how do we move away from the status quo? This leads us into the first section of my presentation, where I'll talk about 3 ways to boost your confidence, and then 3 ways that you can keep your audience engaged. One of the best ways to grow your confidence is to know that you're making a good impression on camera. There are, of course, the typical suggestions for growing your confidence, like making sure you practice a lot and write out a script and dress to impress, which is, of course, all great advice. But I want to talk about the less obvious ways to grow confidence that will be particularly helpful based on our virtual setups. So I'll share my favorite 3 tips first, and then keep in mind that many of the other tips I'm sharing throughout this presentation will also be applicable to confidence. The first way to increase your confidence, believe it or not, is through great lighting. Lighting is very, very easy to fix, but it's often an afterthought for people for whatever reason. So it may not seem obvious, but lighting has a psychological effect on you. I think I can safely say that most of us want to look good and professional on camera when we're talking to colleagues or customers, at least with the upper half of our bodies, right? But when we look like this, it's distracting, it's unclear, and it doesn't leave the other side with the best impression. And of course, you as a presenter, you probably don't feel really great about how you're coming across either. So here's how we fix that. You'll want to make sure that you have a light source in front of you, facing your face. Make sure it's never coming from behind you, facing your back, or else that will cause you to be backlit and look like you're in a true crime documentary. The ideal situation is you actually have a window in front of you, so you're getting natural light, again, coming in from the front, facing your face. If you still need an extra boost, I would recommend purchasing a ring light or 2. I actually have 2 on either side of my desk right now, as well as a softbox. Once you have your lighting ready to go, the next thing you'll want to upgrade is your visuals. I think many of us have probably heard various stats showing how powerful visuals are. For example, 90% of the information processed by the brain is visual, or 80% of people remember what they see versus hear and read, and 65% of people are visual learners. If you've ever told a story where everyone was attentive and really excited about what you had to say next, you'll know what sort of confidence boost that gives you. The same goes with your presentation. If you're using visuals well, your viewers are going to be more tuned in and actually retain what you're telling them, which is going to make you feel more confident about what you're sharing. Visuals can also be helpful in other ways when it comes to confidence building. I don't know about all of you, but for me, one of the scariest things about presenting is feeling like everyone is staring at me and judging my every word. But I found that adding visuals helps me relax more as a presenter because they balance out the audience's attention between me and my content. Now, the last way that visuals give me confidence is through what I like to call the teacher effect. So you can see this chart here was edited to be partially transparent, so I can walk my audience through it, similar to how a teacher would at the front of the classroom. And that authority I have when I do that makes me feel more confident. Now, creating great visuals as someone who isn't a designer can be daunting, and I'm sure there are some of you in the audience thinking, okay, this is great in theory, but I'm not a designer. I don't know how to use Photoshop. How can I create great visuals? And my answer to that is to show you this video here of career coach Diana Chan, who is using a template and simply inserting her photos and text in it like she would, or like you would in a PowerPoint. Please don't think that you need to start from scratch to create something that looks good, because as you see here, there is no need for that. So next, let's talk about our last tip for building confidence, which is to curate your video background. Having a well thought out, curated background is going to give a more professional look and feel to your presentation. And similar to lighting, if you look more professional, you're going to feel better about how you're coming off. Now, before I moved into this apartment here, my bed was literally right behind my desk, and I always felt really self-conscious about it, wondering when I was on video, were people paying attention to me? Were they getting distracted by what was going on behind me? And spacing issues like these, they can't always be helped, but if you're in a similar situation, I would recommend buying some sort of room divider, or I had a coworker who hung up a curtain behind him, so there's a lot of creative solutions to at least give the illusion of a proper workspace and make you feel more confident about how you're appearing on camera. When you're starting off, a clean background like Jessica is using here usually works best so that you and your content don't get lost and so people don't get distracted by what's going on behind you. But once you get comfortable with your background, you can start getting creative with it. So, are there any NPR fans in the audience? If so, you might recognize Guy Raz. He chose an outdoor setting for his video, and it looks great. And he's also getting all that natural light that I mentioned earlier. Or I love this example by Ted. She only had 2 plants behind her, but she had all of this natural light, and the colors of the plants really popped against the white. So I thought it was such a beautiful setup, and she looked so professional, but also really approachable. All right, so now that we've covered our first 3 tips, let's do a quick recap. And just so you're all prepared, I'll be doing a multiple recaps throughout this presentation to help make sure the concepts really stick, since there's going to be a lot of information, as Mary Ellen said. So to gain more confidence, you'll want to adjust your lighting, use visuals, and curate your background. Next up, we'll talk about 3 ways that you can keep your audience engaged. Like I showed earlier, many of us continue to see presentations where the presenter is sharing their screen, sitting on a slide for 10 minutes, and your response is either this or this, when you should really look more like this. So how do we make sure that we're standing out and they're not tuning out? One way we can do this is with the Think, Do, Feel matrix. The Think, Do matrix was created by author and professor Andrew Abella. And what this matrix does is it helps you map out how your audience thinks and what they're currently doing. And then it helps you decide and map out how you want these things to change after they see your presentation. Now, this Think, Do matrix here has since been modified by Presi's Spencer Waldron to become the Think, Do, Feel matrix, because emotion is going to be so important in connecting with your audience and persuading them to make changes or to take action. If we're really honest with ourselves, emotions are what often end up driving decisions, not necessarily facts and logic. So try taking a stab at filling this out before your next presentation. This is what mine looked like for this one. This matrix is going to definitely help you create a more memorable presentation because you'll have a better understanding of who your audience is and what you want them to walk away with, which of course is going to help you build the right content for them. Once you fill this out, the next thing you'll need to do is add movement to your presentation. So adding movement is going to spike your viewer's attention by boosting dopamine in the brain. And I can't promise you your next video is going to be as exciting as a car chase, but you can definitely get closer to it if you start adding some movement. So let's take a moment to really confirm our hypothesis about the impact of movement with our first group activity. So if you could please let me know in the chat, for the last 15 seconds or so, were you primarily watching the video of the car chase, looking at the picture of the car chase, or were you watching me? And there is no wrong answer, and I won't be offended if it wasn't me. So let's see, I'll move over to the chat here. Peyton says the video, Neil video, and me. All right, mix of watching me and the video. All right, one person taking notes. That's great. All right, so it looks like it's a mix of people watching the video, watching me. We were both the things that were moving on the screen. So you're seeing firsthand just how powerful movement can be in drawing attention. Now, I like to recommend at least 2 slides or movements per minute in a virtual setting. And they don't have to be big movements. For example, you can do fun tricks like this to keep your audience engaged. And when you use creative movements like this, you also have the added benefit of creating novelty, which our brains love, and it helps us pay even closer attention. So now that we have our movement down, let's talk about our last tip for keeping engagement, a call to action. We forget so many presentations we watch because there is no follow-up or takeaway. And once someone leaves your meeting or webinar, it's going to be that much harder to capture their attention again. So including a CTA before they leave is going to help with that. Maybe you want them to download your product or connect with you on LinkedIn, or maybe share feedback with you. All of these are really great CTAs, and they can help strengthen your message and keep your audience engaged even after the presentation is over. But now the best CTAs will be the ones that have a specific time constraint. So let's do another group activity that illustrates this. So my CTA for all of you is to make a post on LinkedIn or Twitter, whatever your favorite platform is after this presentation is over, and tag me within the next 24 hours. So you can share an interesting fact you learn and include a screenshot too if you'd like. And when you do this, I will get a better sense for what you all found most interesting. And then your network gets to see that you're taking the time to learn something new and share it with others. So I look forward to seeing those posts from all of you within the next day. Now that we have our 3 tips for engagement, let's do another recap. To keep your audience engaged with your videos, you'll want to use the Think, Do, Feel matrix, add movement, and include a CTA. So now you all have these new tips for gaining confidence and engaging your audience. You're all well on your way to shining on the virtual stage. So let's switch gears now to talk about another crucial element to virtual presenting, video meetings. We're all doing them. Most of us will continue to do some form of them with our hybrid or remote offices. So it's important that we know how to set ourselves up for success. In this section, I'll share 3 tips around how to better connect with the person on the other side of the video, and then 3 tips for giving your presentation additional energy. The first tip to help you connect with prospects and customers and colleagues over video is to focus on your framing. So this is what I often see in video meetings still. So with this angle, I get to see up your nose, your chin. It's, kudos for turning on your camera. It's good to see your face, but this is a bit too close and frankly can be uncomfortable to the other side. And there's actually a scientific reason for this. People skills expert Vanessa Van Edwards says that this is because this feeling of being too close on camera replicates what we might feel in person when someone gets in our personal space. Our brain's reaction is to think that this person could harm us, and it activates our amygdala, which processes fear. And fear is not a feeling we want to be giving others on a work call. Now, being this close is also an issue because it makes it harder for the other side to stay engaged when they're talking to just a floating head with no movement or space to give their eyes a break, like we have in normal in-person interactions, where we might maybe glance off at a coworker who's walking by or look down to reference our notes. So your video should ideally show your shoulders and a bit of your torso with a little bit of space above your head. When you do this, you are no longer just a floating head, and the other person on the other side of the video will feel more like you're having that in-person conversation with them when they can see your body language and your facial gestures, which I'll touch on later. So let's do another quick group activity to check whether we have the right distance from the camera. So everyone, please stick out your arm. I can't see any of you, so I'm trusting that you're all doing this. But you'll want about an arm's length of distance from you and the camera. If you have less than an arm's length of distance, you're likely too close. So make whatever adjustments you need so that, again, showing the top half of your torso with a little bit of space above your head. Now, feel free to use a laptop stand, use books, use leftover delivery boxes, whatever you find around the house to prop up your camera and put it at the right distance and height. It doesn't need to be anything fancy. Once you have your proper framing ready to go, you can then start thinking about eye contact. Eye contact is going to be really important to make your audience feel like you're connecting with them, but it can be one of the harder things to do, speaking from personal experience. So you should always aim to be looking at the camera or right below it, depending on your setup. This is really hard to do though, because it's human nature to want to look at ourselves to make sure we look okay or to see how we look reacting to something. But as best as you can, fight the urge, and I recommend turning off self-view to help with that. I also see a lot of presentations and even video calls where people are looking kind of sideways at their slide or sometimes entirely at a separate monitor, which makes them look really distracted and disengaged. So if you think the presenter's feeling that way, the audience is going to feel that way too, of course. So as best as you can, look right below the camera or at the camera so the person on the other side feels like you're looking at them. The last tip for connecting with your audience is to smile. Smiling is one of those things that presenters often forget to do, especially when you're nervous, but it can have such an impact on how your audience connects with you. When you get ready to make a presentation or record yourself on video, you may experience any one of these super fun emotions as nerves and anxieties build up. For my first two keynote presentations, I was personally these first two here. Now, if I had let those expressions be the main ones in my presentation, the audience probably would not have enjoyed it very much. Instead, when we smile, the audience sees that we're enjoying ourselves and we're excited about what we're talking about, and it encourages them to feel the same. You've probably heard that a smile is contagious, and it applies to virtual presenting and video communications as well. A smile is going to lift your mood and the mood of those around you. Now, as I mentioned before, remembering to smile took me a while to practice and to remember when I started presenting, but once I got more comfortable, it did really make a big difference in how my audience connected with me and engaged with the presentation. So now that we all have our smiles on, let's bring those into the next recap. You're going to want to make sure you have the right framing, that you're using eye contact, and that you are smiling. Next, let's talk about how to insert some energy into your presentation, which is especially important over video because we have this additional barrier that we have to break through. The first thing you'll want to do is to stand up or sit up with good posture. Standing up is going to give your presentation a whole different energy. So this video here is of keynote speaker Brian Fanzo. And you can see when he's standing, even though this video is silent, there is so much energy and it feels really dynamic. You can see he's able to use his space more effectively when he interacts with his visuals. And as a viewer, it's just a lot more engaging to watch than if you were just sitting down passively in his chair. If you can't stand or you don't want to, make sure that you're sitting up with straight posture and not relaxed and slumped. And a great way to do this is to make sure that you are sitting on the front half of your chair. One thing to watch out for when you stand is to make sure not to rock back and forth. It's something I've done before when I've been nervous, so if you need to, record yourself practicing so you can see how you look. And if you decide to sit down, the equivalent of this would be swiveling in your chair from side to side. The next tip I want to share with you all is to project your voice. So this is a really nice trick that I learned from my colleague Spencer, who I mentioned earlier. Raising your voice 20 to 25% louder than you might normally speak is going to help you eliminate filler words that might otherwise creep in and make you seem unsure of yourself. When you raise your voice, you get rid of those filler words by becoming more intentional about what you say. If you listen to yourself speaking later, you'll notice that filler words usually sneak in when you're speaking in a more relaxed manner. Now, the last tip to round out this section will be to use hand gestures. If you're not using your hands on video, you're missing out on a big opportunity. Research has shown that movements like open palms and mirroring the other person's body language makes a person on the other side of the camera have a more positive impression of you, and you come across as warmer and more energetic. So here's a video by Vanessa Van Edwards. I mentioned her earlier when I talked about the amygdala. She does such a great job using hand gestures, and she's actually talking about them here. And her team did a really interesting analysis of popular TED Talks by views, and they found that the most viral videos had speakers who used an average of 465 hand gestures, while the least popular TED Talks used 272. So that's nearly 50% less. I think this data clearly shows how important hand gestures are, but they aren't always the most natural thing when we're on video and our hands are resting on our keyboard or our mouse. So I'd recommend starting off with simple ones. You can use basic gestures like counting things off. If you're talking about something small, pinch gesture works well, or widen your hand positioning if it's something big. And if all of that still feels kind of weird to you, I like to recommend just waving at the start and at the end of a meeting just to get you comfortable with getting your hands moving and on screen. So now that we have all our tips for adding energy into your presentation, let's recap. To add energy, make sure to stand up, project your voice, and use hand gestures. So now that we have all of these amazing tips to create really great videos, we'll use this knowledge for the last section of this presentation, where we'll talk about how you can take the videos you're creating, and make sure they get the most engagement and reach possible on LinkedIn. I'll be sharing 3 tips for how you can get more visibility, develop your brand as a thought leader, and grow followers on LinkedIn, all with your video content. So LinkedIn is a really great place to build up thought leadership and to get noticed by industry experts, thought leaders, recruiters, you name it. Years ago, initially access to posting on LinkedIn was open to a group of LinkedIn influencers. So these were often CEOs or executives at big companies. But now, LinkedIn has thankfully opened up the platform so that anyone can post and share content. Now, when I was an editor at LinkedIn, people would often ask if they could join the influencer program. They thought that this was the best way to get the most engagement possible. But what these people didn't realize is that, contrary to popular belief, it's not always the influencers who get the most engagement. It's the people like me or like you who are publishing regularly, sharing their thoughts, and engaging with their commenters and followers. So, how do we become one of these people who are getting lots of engagement on LinkedIn? The first tip I have for sharing content on LinkedIn is to share, surprise, surprise, videos specifically. The feed is saturated with written posts, but fewer videos. So now's the time to take advantage of that to really stand out. And when you do share, make sure you're sharing your video as a native upload. So what this means is that you would click the video button here on desktop or mobile, and then you're uploading the MP4 file directly into the post. This way, the video is going to play automatically in the feed for more views and engagement. Like as we mentioned before, movement is what catches attention and catches the eye. So this is a really great way to do that. And just a note for any of you who want to try this, your video needs to be 10 minutes or less to work as a native upload. The second tip is that your content should ideally be relevant and timely. If you created content around a topic that's trending in the LinkedIn news module, which is what you see here on desktop, your post may get picked up by one of the editors. And if you get featured, you'll notice a spike in your followers as this module, of course, being on the desktop, gets a lot of traffic. And the great thing is that these followers will continue to be your followers even after the story expires. So for any future video content or written content that you're posting, they may show up in their feeds, and then you'll have a bigger network who may engage with it. And then when they engage with it, their network might engage with it, and so on and so on. And so you're creating a really nice viral loop there. And just so you all know, there are a lot of stories these days in here about the future of work and remote work and hybrid work. So this is a really great chance to inject your insights as it relates to your industry or role. And the last tip I want to share with all of you is to optimize your content. You'll want to research hashtags and use the ones that make sense for your content so it can be discovered by more people. You'll want to tag others and companies so that they get notified and hopefully engage with or reshare your content. And lastly, you'll want to ask questions. So the LinkedIn algorithm is very focused on conversations. So comments are going to be what boosts your content in the feed. So I'll repeat that again for anyone who zoned out. Comments are the most important social action on LinkedIn to boost your content in the feed. And asking questions is going to be one of the best ways to invite people into the conversation. I can't tell you how many people I've spoken to who want to contribute on LinkedIn, but they just don't know where to start, or they don't know if it's okay for them to do so. So asking a question is really opening up that invitation. So those were our 3 LinkedIn tips. Let's dive into the recap. To build your presence on LinkedIn with video content, you'll want to upload your videos natively, stay relevant and timely, and use hashtags, tags, and ask questions. There are, of course, many other things you can do to build your visibility on LinkedIn through video and otherwise. I have a whole other presentation on it, but for now, I'll send you all these additional, or you have all these additional resources here. You can take a screenshot, which will have even more information about sharing on LinkedIn and also other really great information like how to optimize your profile. So I think it's very clear, especially from the past year and a half, that video is here to stay. So I would love to hear from all of you in the chat. Which 1 or 2 or more tips will you implement first as you embrace the world of video? So moving back over to the chat here.
Oh, yes, and we have some good quick questions, so we got a minute. Maybe we can fire through them before we switch over. We let the other group know they had to wait for you.
Okay, thank you.
So, all right, so the first one, Carol asked, she said under 10 minutes to upload, which that's the max, but what is your recommended ideal length? Like, so if I'm going to make a video and I'm going to natively upload it, like what should I aim for?
I think it really, as most of the answers to these questions are, it depends on your audience, but I would aim for, 3 to 5, but experiment, see what gets the most engagement. Yeah.
I make my people hold to 2, and that's mostly because like I feel like I'm doing this B2B stuff, and it's like it's really
it
easy
needs to be fast, right?
Really fast. If I let them go over 2, if I tell them 2, they'll do 2.5 or 3. So, all right, and then this one cracked me up. Carol also asked what we were using for the visuals, and it was like it's Prezi. And then she also asked again another Carol question right quick, that she struggles with the lighting from the glare on her glasses, which is a problem I used to have, like until I got LASIK, so I get that. Like, what do you do to get glare off of glasses? Do you have any suggestions?
I do. So I would avoid ring lights if you're wearing glasses and use a softbox and put those on the side of your desk and have the light coming like this, just not from the front. And I think that will be very helpful to remove glare. And then if it's coming from your monitor, try to see if you can angle either your glasses a little bit or tilt the monitor a little bit downwards.
And then last one here, again, it gets these very technical, like very specific questions. The background, fake background. So people are saying, what about fake backgrounds? Can you, because everybody's got those Zoom backgrounds. Is that a good idea, a bad idea, something if you have to?
Yeah, good question. I get asked that a lot. So I think they're good for fun team activities. Put a movie poster in your background or things like that. But I think when it's business communications, a business meeting, I prefer not to see them just because your eyes and your mind is already working extra hard to interpret what's going on in the video. And when you start having, kind of the fuzzy side and someone's like half their head disappears and their arm is like reappearing, it's just extra distracting. So I like to recommend, again, just curate your background and try to just use the real thing.
Yeah, plain is better, I think, than trying to do that. I will say the one exception is if you're going to do that, like if you actually have a green screen, it can work a little better. But I think if you don't have a green screen, like you're going to have a lot of fuzziness and weirdness. But green screens don't work for me though, because I have like blue-green eyes. So like a cheap green screen, I don't really get that. It's a weird effect. You want to see a really weird effect on those backgrounds. I don't do that. All right, cool. All right, well, I think that takes us to time, and we do have like our last session. Thank you so much for this, Lorraine. This was like one of those like, this is a master class, and it's going to go fast, and you can come back later. You can watch the recording if you missed it.
If you have any more questions that I didn't get to, I'm happy to do that.
All right. Awesome. Well, thanks everybody. Let's go bounce over for the last session of the day, which is going to be a discussion with a couple of 3 of my favorite content strategists, wrapping up what we learned.